we talk about marriage and like here's I guess like the caveat that makes things more complicated,
Okay.
right? There are men out there that will do their obligations whether they like it or not. And that is a good thing when it works, and it is like a horrific thing when it doesn't, right? So the rumors are, and I haven't been able to substantiate this, was that there was a pregnancy or pregnancy scare that convinced him to marry her.
I heard that too.
So he was fulfilling his obligations and not necessarily he actually chose her. And I think like we've had this conversation all the time, right? Like when you marry the woman that you love versus the woman that you're obligated to, what that winds up looking like. So I think this is an unfortunate example of that.
So we may have to revisit that one of these days because this is a good example of that exact what we spoke about. That always win, that hearts, that preference, that it always comes. That's how most cheating takes place. Wait, what? We done went down to 3. Oh Lord, she done left us. But until then, I shall be in the middle.
Also, I was going to add to his business
That's
image
damage.
and what he
Two white skins.
teaches.
Oh, maybe I should put Inaz in the middle because she looks like what me and you make together. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm on one. Okay, so listen. But that is so interesting to me. But there's, I get that. You have to. The crazy thing about it was when Miss Seiki was talking, I thought along that line too. It's kind of like, okay, what it sounded like to me, but I didn't watch this. What you're saying, Enos, makes perfect sense. But what I originally thought was, here's a guy who, sometimes when guys get fame, they start to get the women that they would have chosen had they had the opportunity. Now these women are in your face because you have a platform. They associate that with money, so to speak. So you have access to more women that you may not have had access to before. But he's a nice looking guy. So I'm pretty sure I don't know how tall he is, but he's a nice looking guy. And so what has happened is now these women have made themselves available to him. And now there's competition. So she's like, oh my God, like competitive mode, like I gotta win him back. I gotta get my husband. And so then she goes to research these things. And now, like Mistaken said, it's like, listen, I can't lose my man to these women, but it's so much bigger than her. Like, you gotta remember when she married him, social media probably didn't even popping like that. Like, this culture has changed tremendously since they probably got married. I mean, just think about 10 years ago, people weren't just out here giving out cookie, like, free of charge. And
so wait, okay.
Because
here's the thing: is because like, what's the common rhetoric, right? There's like the single motherhood epidemic.
Okay.
Those kids are all over a decade old. So like really like
okay, so listen. Single mother. So that's just lack of traditional because a lot of single mothers come from relationships. You know what I'm saying? So maybe if we're going to talk about marriage, sure. If you're talking about the covenant of God and you go by the Bible, of course you will want people to be married. But stats have shown that a lot of these kids are produced in cohabitating homes. That they are living together. They're just not married to each other.
But that goes back to what you were mentioning earlier, right? Are we considering relationships that are not marriage single or not? Right?
Oh, for sure. We're going to talk about that today.
Right. So legally, they're single.
And legally, they are single, but you cannot. So you can't compare a person who is in a long-term relationship who gets knocked up by a person who's out here thotting and bopping. Because a lot of people who are thotting and bopping don't have kids. That's why they out going from household to household because they don't have anybody at home they have to tend to. They're in abortion clinics. They're doing all these things to not show a trace. But yet they got their legs wide open, probably right now as we speak. So that's not, it's going to be hard to pinpoint that. A lot of hoes ain't got kids.
And people are having sex later too.
They just know how to hoe undercover. Undercover.
I'm just thinking about how exhausting though it must have been to I mean, I'm gonna give her. I mean, she has to own that, but I mean, she has a choice at the end of the day. You know what happens, what she does, and what happens in her marriage. But just having to, measure up to whatever this is. Like, am I doing, enough here or there, and always looking outside of you? It's like he really didn't. Well, and we already talked about the pregnancy a little bit, but if that was the reason they got married, but I mean, she probably couldn't be herself. I mean, because obviously, if she wasn't his type,
To that point, I think that that is actually the biggest issue. I think when she met him, if it was in college, I don't know what year, freshman year, whatever, but we talk a lot about men needing time to develop and find out who they are and what they are before they get in a marriage or long term relationship or what have you. But we don't give women the same grace in the sense that we say, well, they need to hurry up and get married when they're young because that's when they're the most marketable, they're the most malleable. We groom them; they're easy to groom, and so the easier to groom part is because you have a lack of who you are, right? You don't know who you are yet, so you have a limited mindset in terms of what your standards are going to be, what your boundaries are to some degree. So I think in that situation, for her, she had her eyes set on who she wanted. And to Anah's point, because she didn't have a sense of who she was trying to be everything that she saw him with and didn't measure up because that wasn't his type. But she didn't have the ability to even recognize that because her goal was just to win. But if she had had a better sense of who she was, I don't even think that she would have even like kind of approached in that regard because she would have already saw, or it would have been a more natural where she was just being herself and he happened to be attracted to that.
I think so. I agree, but I think the other part of that is that I think it's kind of a fair expectation that women grow up a little bit faster, right? Because we have our biological clock, we have body count, we have all of these things where is socially unacceptable for women to conduct themselves in, right? I guess my thing is, even if she was young and was not developed and ready to be a wife and was not sure of herself, then where were the adults? Where were the adults to be like, listen, sweetheart, you're moving a little funny. I don't think this is going to work. That, I don't, you know what I mean? Where was her
If she
father,
was in
his family?
college, if she was in college in a way at college,
Nope, doesn't matter, right? Because at some point there needed to there was a conversation of, hey, we're getting married, right? And at some point there was a, let's meet him. And at some point there was sweetheart, you're not really being yourself in this situation. What are we doing? Right? If the adults were more involved, what happened to that conversation? Was it ever even had? Was there anybody that gave her instruction? And even if it wasn't parents, where was a mentor? Where was a teacher? Where was a girlfriend who was like, girl, what are we doing? This man likes the idea of you. He doesn't actually like you, right?